Today it was announced that Friberg will be leaving NiP. He's been on the team for nearly 5 years, since August of 2012, since the beginning of CSGO. And for a time he was on the most dominant team. He was part of a winning lineup, the team that went 87-0. Now he wasn't ever a star player, a player on the forefront in terms of talent, ability, playmaking, as Get Right and Forrest were. But he was part of that lineup, and apparently they felt an attachment to Friberg, but that has gone on for far too long. They've been just cycling their fifth player and kept the four-man core. But after making it to only one playoffs in 2017, failing to make it out of the E-League major qualifier, failing the PGL minor qualifier, and failing to make it out of the online component of EPL, they have decided to cut Friberg and replace him with a player from Epsilon called Rez. So, um, before Friberg became known as the problem or the greatest problem on NiP, Fiflerin, another NiP player, was recognized as the most deadweight player on the team. He had received lots of criticism, lots of hate on social media, and then he decided in 2014 to step back. That was approximately 2.5 years ago, and since then there have been four replacements in his role. Those were Michaelele, Alu, Pitt, and Draken. Draken now being the current fifth player on the team, although I guess now he's the fourth player since Rez has come in. Anyways, in this time, Friberg's play has been criticized substantially, and many people have called for his removal. And to the fury, the infuriation of some people in the community, especially lovers of Swedish Counter-Strike like myself, Friberg and Exist and perhaps even Get Right should have been removed at that time. So clearly, Mike Lele and Alu Pitt were not the problem. So I'll kind of go through what the context for them joining the team, the context of the removal as well. So Michael Lele, he joined right after Fiflerin. He was an opera, played on LGB, had some success in the past, and when he joined NiP, he was also an opera. And the problem with Michael Lele was that he had a bit too of a fiery personality. He was a bit too hyper, a bit too emotional, and the other NiP players were the typically Swedish, cool, calm, mild, mellow sorts of personalities, and they had a conflict with that, and Michael Lele was removed from the team in favor of a more cool, calm, collected player in Alu, who definitely fit the bill. Since being removed from NiP, Michael Lele had formed the very successful G2, or Kingwin, that formed into G2 and now FaZe. They really found their major success after Michael Lele left, and now he's playing for a fairly low-level team in Dignitas, but at least I think they did better than NiP at the minor, which is the minor qualifier, which is good. So yeah, Michael Lele, they passed up a good Swedish talent there just because they didn't get along, and I understand the problems with playing with someone who doesn't get along with you, but they really passed up a good Swedish talent in favor of someone who didn't even speak their own language, Alu. They said that they could communicate in Swedish, that Finns and Swedes could understand each other, but that simply was not the case. Alu was having to speak English with them, and with a team where you're supposed to be able to think on the fly, speak on the fly, and understand all these calls immediately to communicate very long, thought out sentences, after the game when you're planning things, when you're going through disputes in the team. It really pays to speak the same language and speak that fluently. Now a team like FaZe, the teams like Mouse Sports, international teams, they will, particularly FaZe, as they are such a good team, a team filled with such amazing stars, they can afford to not speak the same language because they're willing to make these roster changes. But NiP, that simply was not the case. Keeping the same four-man core, keeping players like Exist and Friberg on the team, you're obviously not going to, that tier communication is going to be too big. So yeah, they had Alu, a good player in his own right, a very stable opper, someone who you can count on to hold a spot, to count on to get some kills, like an improved version of Skadoodle, basically. So they removed Alu after he played for a bit of time, and he kind of went off into the Finnish wilderness with Ents, and then he later joined FaZe and has found great success there. Then they brought in Pitt, who was playing in North America on Luminosity and Winter Fox. Then kind of left the Swedish scene because there wasn't enough opportunities for a player like him, because like all the talent was really concentrated in Fnatic and NiP. But when NiP had an opening, of course, in their fifth position, they brought in Pitt. Pitt, he was a somewhat unknown player, but he proved himself to be a very good rifler, playing up to the level of it was him and Forrest were the two-star players, consistent stars. Get Right, he Exist, Friberg, in that order, pretty much they were able to bring fairly good performances, but Pitt and Forrest were the two stars. And instead of putting the op role on someone like Get Right or Exist or Friberg, players who were not doing as well as Pitt and Forrest, they decided to put it on Pitt, the new guy, and a guy who wasn't very good on the op, a guy who specialized in rifles, and that really took down his performance. And they could have even had Forrest do the opping, as that's something that he's done in the past and something he's been fairly competent on. So they basically drove Pitt's career into the ground there, and they benched him after that. And then they, I guess after having a relationship with some of the Epsilon players, because Pitt was on the bench for a while due to a wrist injury, they had some Epsilon substitutes. Then they brought in Draken after benching Pitt for a full-time position. So, Pitt he's still kind of in the wilderness. He's not playing for a top team, even though he is a top talent. And the story with all these players is that they were brought into NiP. They were showing very good individual performances, but the weak players, especially Exist and Friberg, they were really dead weight on the team. They were just holding them back from achieving stuff like what players like Get Right and Forrest and insert fifth man name here, what they were capable of doing. So you got these two players who really haven't accomplished anything on their own, accomplished anything to the likes of Forrest or Get Right's level. They kind of just had amazing team chemistry in the beginning and were riding that out until the end, until they failed the minor qualifier, basically. So I think the NiP roster fiasco has far more reaching implications than many people have realized. I think that it really has trashed the Swedish scene to a fairly large degree. So they pick up players like Pitt, who are promising newer players who haven't played on the top scene, and that they bring them into the team and they like take them out of their prime, and then Pitt kind of just plays on a team where he's not accomplishing anything. He's not winning championships. He's not there. There is no material result for what Pitt is doing in game and individually, and the rest of these players are kind of just there, and that's it. They're making it to the group stages of tournaments, occasionally the playoffs in 2016 and 2015, but beyond that, they're not really doing anything. So that's quite unfortunate. But besides just kind of taking these players and then ruining these individual players' careers, or at least for a time, like taking time out of their prime, their peak, they're also harming the surrounding Swedish teams and players. Instead of Pitt playing for Epsilon or Godsent, where he could have done something with those teams, where they could have improved with Pitt and then gone up to the tier 1 of Counter-Strike, that Pitt is just plucked out of their team, and that's it. Like Draken and Disco Doppelin, when they come a calling, then they just come. The Siren's call of Forest and Get Right is just too tempting, but now, after it being a such a threat to young Swedish players, I guess lots of them have really took a distance from, really stepped back from the respect, the undying loyalty and fandom towards the Ninjas in Pajamas players, how people would give up anything to play on a team with Forrest and Get Right. Like JW, he was on Fnatic, the best team in the world at one time, and even a team more dominant than NiP was, and he was going to leave that all just for the playing with Get Right and Forrest. Fnatic fortunately kept him to his contract, and then he played on one of the best teams ever. So I think NiP has burned some bridges a bit due to their repeated failures at LANs and their lack of material results, and I think it's going to take a long time for them to rebuild. I think it's going to go much faster now that they have removed Friberg, their most problematic player, but I don't think it's going to be fixed overnight to so the Swedish scene, it should be a scene that is on top. There should be 2 or 3 teams within the top 10, but now Fnatic, they haven't really done so well on LAN. They're the best Swedish team. Are they even in the top 10? Maybe. We thought so after they got the Fnatic 2.0 lineup back to their old lineup back together for the second phase, but they haven't really done super well on LAN yet. They haven't won any tournaments. So are there any Swedish teams in the top 10? I'm not sure. I haven't really taken a good look at it yet, but I can certainly say that Epsilon, NiP, and Godsent aren't. So that really is a knock from what the Swedish scene used to be, and now they're being overtaken by Denmark, a incredibly small country with a few million people, yet Sweden was the premier Counter-Strike nation for the past 15 years. There was always good Swedish teams, and Denmark historically only had one Swedish team and some good Danish talent. So I'm really concerned about what this means for Swedish Counter-Strike, because I know that Swedish Counter-Strike has the capability of being the best, the most enjoyable to watch, and for the past year or so, it hasn't been that enjoyable because there hasn't been that really good team, or those 2 or 3 really good teams. Now that they're just kind of festering, they're just left to rot, and hopefully they can turn that around, but it's going to take a long time to rebuild, as I had said. Anyway, to move on to Friberg and his future, I think that he has a similar future to Starx. I think that he could play for a tier 2 or 3 Swedish team, like how Starks is now playing for Team Spirit, I think, and I think that the potential that Friberg has to offer these, one or two good players that are on these tier two or three Swedish teams, I think he could really jumpstart their careers. They could get picked up by a good team, and before they already go to LAN, they have that experience and they have the knowledge and the wisdom that Friberg imparted on them. A player who was there for the 87-0, the player who was there for all the major finals that they were in. So I think that Friberg definitely does have a place in the Counter-Strike scene, and I think he should stick around. I think that he could even go to a Danish team like Heroic or Tricked, and obviously that's not the most ideal situation, but I think a team like that, a team where there's not a whole lot of expectations for them, I think that he could impart some very valuable knowledge that he has. I also think that Friberg could become a coach for a team, wouldn't have become a coach for a team like NiP, but maybe there's a North American team out there who is looking for someone like Friberg. I'm not sure of how tactically suited he is, but he certainly has that wisdom that a lot of North American or just teams in general are looking for. So I think that Friberg definitely has a future, but I don't think that future is with NiP. I think that his time on NiP should have ended a long time ago. I think that before waiting for the failures that you had at the minor qualifier, the major qualifier in EPL, and in tournaments in general, I think that this should have been cut off before the catastrophe.